So I am back with another transfer window update for Manchester City today, and this has been a very hectic week, even more so than the last couple of videos that I have done. We've secured 2 signings in the last week, and there is just so much to get into from this video and so much to unpack news-wise. Let's just get straight into this. And I feel like there's no better place to start off than with our first signing of the window, our first signing of the summer, and that is Tijjani Reijnders to Manchester City. A massive, massive piece of business. And let's just run you through all of the activity throughout the week that led up to the signing. And it started off pretty positively with Fabrizio Romano saying that Manchester City and Milan are speaking for Reijnders. Reijnders is getting really close, really close to joining Manchester City. It's just about discussing more times to reach an agreement on the transfer fee, but it's advancing fast. With it coming out the next day that Manchester City will complete a £60 million deal for AC Milan to Tijjani Reijnders this week, and are also looking to seal a £35 million agreement to sign Lyon's Rayan Cherki before the FIFA Club World Cup. But then after days of pretty much no transfer news whatsoever on Tijjani Reijnders, it then came out from Fabrizio Romano on Tuesday that Manchester City are now closing in on Tijjani Reijnders, with the two clubs in the process of completing an agreement before the FIFA Club World Cup. Personal terms between Reijnders and Manchester City have been finalised. And then that same day, a separate source came out and said that Tijjani Reijnders to Manchester City could be completed tomorrow, and that AC Milan and Manchester City are finalising details over a deal for Tijjani Reijnders, with the final fee set to be around €70 million. And then the next day, Demarzio reports that Manchester City have reached an agreement over a deal for Tijjani Reijnders around €70 million, including bonuses. And then the news broke. Fabrizio Romano gave his "here we go," as you can see here, breaking Tijjani Reijnders to Manchester City. Here we go, confirmed by Fabrizio Romano. And with David Ornstein also confirming that Tijjani Reijnders has agreed a 5-year contract at Manchester City, with a deal worth €55 million plus add-ons. And with a separate source confirming that Tijjani Reijnders' 5-year Manchester City contract will be worth €7 million plus bonuses per season. With it also coming out that Tijjani Reijnders to Manchester City is worth a guaranteed €55 million to €58 million plus bonuses, some of which are easier to achieve than others. AC Milan can easily reach €65 million, while difficult bonuses can take the deal to €70 million. With Fabrizio Romano then confirming the next day that Tijjani Reijnders is due to undergo his Manchester City medical on Sunday. And this is just an absolutely fantastic signing all around. We've signed one of the best midfielders in the world, the perfect Ilkay Gundogan replacement. He's an absolutely superb footballer, both in and out of possession. I've made a video talking about Tijjani Reijnders and why I think he'll fit so well into Manchester City, so I'm not going to talk too much about him. If you do want to know my full opinions, though, go check that video out. It is the last video that I've posted on my YouTube channel. But all in all, a superb signing. But all in all, is an absolutely superb signing. But we've also got to talk about another signing that Manchester City have made this week, and that is Rayan Ait-Nouri from Wolverhampton Wanderers. With news breaking from David Ornstein on Monday that Manchester City are pursuing a deal to sign Wolves left-back Rayan Ait-Nouri. Agreements still need to be reached between the clubs and with the player. However, all parties now expect move to happen. With Jack Gorn coming out the next day, with Jack Gorn coming out on the same day, and also saying Manchester City are hoping to get a deal done for Rayan Ait-Nouri sooner rather than later, and expect to complete the signing, having admired the player for over 12 months. And with a separate source from the Telegraph saying that Wolves have already begun their search for a new left-back in expectation that Rayan Ait-Nouri will join Manchester City, with the player keen on the move, which should be agreed in time for the FIFA Club World Cup. With Jacobs Ben also coming out on the same day and saying Manchester City value Rayan Ait-Nouri at around £30 million to £35 million, while Wolves want over £40 million. Angers have a sell-on clause of 50% on the player, but Wolves can buy this out for a fee in the region of £8.5 million. And then the advancement in this deal just began to fly out of absolutely nowhere. Fabrizio Romano then confirming that Rayan Ait-Nouri has said yes to Manchester City. With it then coming out on Thursday that Rayan Ait-Nouri to Manchester City is closing in on completion for a £35 million fee, with the deal likely to include add-ons. And then it was confirmed by Fabrizio Romano later that day, as you can see here, breaking Rayan Ait-Nouri to Manchester City. Here we go, confirmed by Fabrizio Romano. An agreement between Wolves and Manchester City has been reached at close to €40 million, with medical tests to take place on Saturday. And it being confirmed that Rayan Ait-Nouri to Manchester City, £33.7 million as per Chardunka. Wolves are expected to add on bonus payments and potentially a sell-on clause to the deal, with Fabrizio Romano underneath giving it the tick of approval. approval, with then David Ornstein coming out and saying Rayan Ait-Nouri will now sign a 5-year contract at Manchester City with the option of a further year in a £33 million move from Wolves. And that is two fantastic pieces of business within the same week from Manchester City. Hugo Viana is absolutely doing a phenomenal job at the moment. Ait-Nouri and Tijjani Reijnders. Ait-Nouri is finally a traditional, more traditional left back at the football club. So that will be really exciting to see him come into the squad next season. He's a very exciting footballer, very nimble on his feet, can dribble with the ball very, very well. So he is going to produce a lot of excitement at the Etihad next season. So I'm looking forward to the signing of Ait-Nouri, and we're going to be able to see Ait-Nouri and Reijnders both operate in the Club World Cup. But now let's get on to the big one. And when I say the big one, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. Rayan Cherki from Olympic Lyon. This is the one that has been running all week long. There's so much to cover on this one, so I'm going to bring you guys all up to speed right now. And it started off at the beginning of the week with reports coming out that Manchester City are in advanced and concrete talks with Rayan Cherki, and the player is open to the move. The 21-year-old is set to cost over 30 million euros, although there are currently no negotiations between Manchester City and Lyon. With it also coming out on the same day that Rayan Cherki could sign for Manchester City in the coming days after emerging as the priority target in the number 10 role. Manchester City want the player in time for the FIFA Club World Cup, and Lyon would like a quick sale at around 40 million euros. With it also coming out that Manchester City officials have contacted those directly around Rayan Cherki and have also taken information from his former coaches, including his ex-manager at Lyon. Pep Guardiola has not yet spoken directly with the player. But then on the following day, Fabrizio Romano released information that Manchester City are set to submit their opening bid for Rayan Cherki next week. The plan is now to accelerate for the Frenchman and try to seal the deal for Tijjani Reijnders in the coming days. With Jacobs Ben then coming out on the same day saying Lyon want 30 million euros plus for Rayan Cherki, with Manchester City currently in advanced talks over a deal. And then the next day, Fabrizio Romano reported that Manchester City are confident of completing a deal with Lyon for Rayan Cherki in excess of 30 million euros. The clubs are in talks and expect a move to advance fast this week. And that Pep Guardiola has been in contact with Rayan Cherki in recent days, while Manchester City have also spoken to the player and his agents about contract terms, project, vision, and more. And then on Monday, it came out that Rayan Cherki has already expressed openness to the idea of working with Pep Guardiola and believes he can reveal his full potential at Manchester City. The player's entourage are finalizing personal terms with Manchester City and expect to sign a long-term contract. With it also coming out that Lyon should receive an initial written offer from Manchester City for Rayan Cherki early this week, and all parties also hope to conclude the deal this week. And with Plenty Goal reporting that talks between Manchester City and Rayan Cherki are progressing well with personal terms almost agreed, the main issue remains an agreement between the clubs, with the player valued at 35 million to 40 million euros. A long transfer saga is not expected. And then the following day, it came out that, according to Jacobs Ben, that Lyon are sticking to their 30 million euro plus asking price for Rayan Cherki and will not sanction a cut price deal despite the player entering his final year contract. The 21-year-old remains keen on a Manchester City move if an agreement can be found as talks continue, and also reported that talks are now progressing between Manchester City and Lyon for Rayan Cherki on that same day. But then on Wednesday, it came out, according to Fabrizio Romano, that Manchester City have reached an agreement on personal terms with Rayan Cherki, and an official bid will be submitted to Lyon in the next hours. And then later that night, it came out that Lyon have rejected Manchester City's first offer for Rayan Cherki, worth around 23 million euros. And I mean, to be honest, that is a ridiculous bid. Let's just be completely honest, if that is true. But then on Thursday, it was reported that Manchester City have agreed terms over a deal for Lyon's Rayan Cherki at around 35 million. The player is expected to undergo a medical over the next few days. And then on Friday, it was reported that talks between Manchester City and Lyon are over Rayan Cherki are at an extremely advanced stage. But it does look like over the coming days, we will be seeing it be announced that Manchester City have signed Rayan Cherki between the mark of about 35 to 40 million euros, which I think is an absolute steal for a player of his quality. We saw in the France game on Thursday evening the quality in which he can bring to games off of the bench for France against Spain. It was 5-1 down they were, and he comes off the bench and he brings France into a position where they are 5-4 finishing the game, and it was all because of him. An absolutely exceptional strike and also an exceptional assist to bring France back into the game. an unbelievable talent. So if we can get him between 35 to 40 million euros, I'll snap your hand off for it. And those are, of course, the ones that everybody really knows about. But let's move on to a couple of other transfer stories of Manchester City transfer links that have been around this week. Starting off with Ederson from Atalanta. With it coming out that Manchester City are discussing a proposal of 70 million euros with Atalanta for midfielder Ederson, according to Georgian Ikola. And to be honest, I don't really know this source. I don't know if this is the most reliable information. And to be completely honest with you, it doesn't really make sense. After signing Nico Gonzalez in January, after signing also Tijjani Reijnders, and having Rodri already at the football club, it wouldn't make sense to spend 70 million euros on Ederson. So for me personally, I'm not really buying this one, but I thought it's still necessary to bring it to you regardless. And on the Morgan Gibbs-White front, which has gone a little bit more quiet, it did come out earlier in the week that by Fabrizio Romano, Morgan Gibbs-White is still on Manchester City's shortlist, but is currently considered too expensive. However, after the Tijjani Reijnders deal, it does look like the Morgan Gibbs-White deal has shut down for now. Morgan Gibbs-White now looks more likely to stay at Nottingham Forest, according to Rich Jolly. And on the rest of the transfer news front, in terms of players that we are linked to, there's not really too much that has come out over the last week. The only really thing that has come out is that Manchester City's right-back search has not been straightforward for Hugo Viana. There is interest in Tino Livramento, but Newcastle are determined to keep him, while nothing has materialized yet with Juventus for Andrea Cambiaso. And that is really all of the transfer news on players that are linked to the club. However, in terms of players out of the club right now, there has been quite a lot of transfer news that has come out. And let's start off with Ait-Nouri, as obviously it has been quite heavily rumored that he will be going out on loan next season, as it's come out here that Girona Sporting Director Quique Carcel has contacted Manchester City for a list of players available on loan. The sides are waiting for UEFA approval to begin negotiations, but Girona want to identify players early. Claudio Ait-Nouri is the one that apparently stands out. And on James McAtee, it doesn't really look like too much has changed at this point and how much has really progressed. However, Bundesliga clubs remain interested in James McAtee, as Eintracht Frankfurt, VfB Stuttgart and Bayer Leverkusen are among the Bundesliga clubs interested in James McAtee this summer, as Nottingham Forest and West Ham have been admirers and Everton have made checks. With it coming out on Thursday that VfB Stuttgart have added James McAtee to their shortlist, Eintracht Frankfurt have made an inquiry, while Bayer Leverkusen are also showing interest. The Manchester City midfielder has interest from Italy, but is very interested in the prospect of Bundesliga football. And in regards to Kyle Walker, well, it's not exactly working out too well for him right now, as AC Milan, I don't think exactly want him. With it coming out that Kyle Walker will not be joining AC Milan permanently and is now set to return to Manchester City following his loan. With Fabrizio Romano coming out and saying that plans confirmed for Kyle Walker, AC Milan will not activate the buy option. Walker will formally return to Manchester City, and then he will leave again, as Walker will not travel for the FIFA Club World Cup. Several approaches already started for new solution. And on the De Bruyne front, as I reported to you last week, it looks pretty much certain that he will now be joining Napoli, as it's come out that Kevin De Bruyne is now a Napoli player. A full agreement has been reached between all parties, with a medical and official announcement expected next week. And finally, we've seen some transfer news in regards to John Stones, who is a player that, in my opinion, probably will leave Manchester City this summer because of, obviously, the amount of game time that he's been able to play and the wages that he gets paid. And it has come out that Everton are ready to approach Manchester City about re-signing John Stones this summer. Manchester City's asking price is unlikely to be prohibitive, and they are aware he needs regular football to push for a place in England's 2026 World Cup squad. But it's not all bad news, because I think most Manchester City fans expected that we're probably going to have to sign one, if not two, goalkeepers this summer window. However, that looks like that might not be the case anymore, as it has come out that Pep Guardiola has indicated that both Ederson and Stefan Ortega will stay at Manchester City this summer, with Pep Guardiola coming out and saying that I don't know much about goalkeepers joining/leaving Manchester City. I tell them to stay. We've talked about the situation of the squad, and the goalkeepers we have will stay. However, it did come out a couple days later that Ederson is open to a move to the Saudi Pro League, so I guess we'll have to see if that develops. However, according to Pep Guardiola, both goalkeepers will stay, which I think Ederson, for me, is the key one. If Ederson stays, I'm very happy. I don't think we need to go out and get a new goalkeeper. Wouldn't be too disappointed if Ortega left, but Ederson, for me, is the one to keep. However, unfortunately, the one that is definitely not going to be the one to keep this summer is Jack Grealish, as news has been coming out thick and fast in the last couple of days about Jack Grealish after it was announced that Jack Grealish is set to be left out of Manchester City's FIFA Club World Cup squad, with Fabrizio Romano tweeting only moments later that this remains the case between Jack Grealish and Manchester City, with City Extra reporting that the feeling at Manchester City is that Jack Grealish's exit from the club in the upcoming summer transfer window is almost guaranteed. And it also came out that Manchester City are open to allowing Jack Grealish to find a new club, and all sides recognise taking the player to the Club World Cup that could last a month would not be in his Manchester City's best interest while he tries to sort his future out, and that should Jack Grealish move this summer, he will do so with the blessing, respect and best wishes of Manchester City. And on Friday, it was reported that Pep Guardiola and the Manchester City board still love Jack Grealish as much for his attitude, popularity in the squad as his quality, but there is a consensus this might be the right time to move on, and Grealish agrees, focusing on his future / finding a new club, and that Jack Grealish is open to all options this summer, wanting a clean break and permanent new home rather than a loan, which Manchester City would sanction, although would prefer to sell. Manchester City accept they will get nowhere near £100 million, and Grealish would be open to staying in the Premier League, wanting to keep playing at the highest level possible and ideally in the Champions League. Grealish also would not rule out a move into Europe, while the last resort would be Saudi Arabia, with it also coming out that Napoli are among Jack Grealish admirers. So that will be very interesting to see how that one progresses. Obviously, Jack Grealish is a player that has not really performed that well in the last couple of years. However, he is a player that is quite heavily loved by Manchester City fans. Obviously, we appreciate what he did for us in the treble winning season, but I agree that this is probably the season to move him on. It's just not worked out in the last couple of years. So I think it's best for us to cut ties with Jack Grealish, obviously, with the amount of money he's on and the amount he's really contributed to us. And he also needs to find consistent football for his career. So I think it's the best case scenario for both parties. And yeah, hopefully by the next transfer video that I bring to you, it is a good news on Rayan Cherki, and we can announce, obviously, that Rayan Cherki has joined the football club. But until then, thank you so much for tuning into the video. I hope I brought to you as much informative content as possible. If you did enjoy the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well if you do want to see more of it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you and peace.